me read Psalm 46. It says this: God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, and she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes war cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. And he says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." This is the word of the Lord. All right, you'll be seeing. I want to get sober. I'm committed to the program, but I'm out on God. Please don't try to talk me into some sort of cosmic therapist that's going to help me say no to gin and tonic. That's the conversation between CJ and his sponsor after their regular Tuesday night AA meeting in the basement of some 150-year-old church on the Upper West Side of New York City a few years back. A couple days later, Owen, who is CJ's sponsor, calls up CJ as the workday is ending. It's drawing to a close, and he says, "Hey, man, I'm parked out front of your place in my car. Come out and get in." "Where are we going?" "Just get in the car." So they get in, and they drive deep into Brooklyn, and they park at an expired meter at Coney Island, and the two of them get out, and they walk on the beach together on a brisk November day. And they sit down on the sand next to each other, and they just look outward. Both of them at this time, they're watching the sunset over the hazy gray sky, watching the ocean pull in and out with the tides, and they're feeling that brisk ocean breeze against their faces. It's cutting through their jackets, and they just keep sitting there silently, not saying a word for a while. And eventually it's Owen who breaks the silence. And he turns to CJ and he says, "Do you see anything out here more powerful than you?" CJ hesitates, thinking this is a trick question. It's a setup. Owen has a way of doing that. And so he begrudgingly, hesitantly says, "Yeah?" And Owen responds, "Great. Prayer starts there. Let's go home." Owen drove CJ where he wasn't going on his own to show him what he wasn't seeking for himself. Do you see anything more powerful than you out here? In other words, can you see yourself, your tiny self, from God's massive perspective for just a moment? Breathe. Praying the Psalms. This is at the heart of what we are trying to do. We're learning, or we're relearning how to pray, to see ourselves as God sees us, to see God as He is. Philip Yancey, an amazing writer on prayer, says that prayer is simply the act of seeing reality from God's point of view. Do you see, when you look around, when you look at the snow falling, we certainly be like, "Yeah, I'm kind of powerless to ice." But the rest of life, do you look around and see through the reality of God's lens and say, "I am powerless and God is powerful. He is God and I'm not. Therefore, I will just follow him, and I'll let him do his thing. Sometimes, like CJ needed from Owen, we know we need someone to take us where we weren't going on our own, to help us see what we're not seeing on our own. And that can be a person, it can be pain, it can be hope, it could be anything. And so to that idea, we need someone like David this morning to act like a mentor, to take us in this place where we can sit back and not just believe these words, but to trust these words and sit back quietly and be still and know that God is God. What would happen today if we walked out of here with just an additional measure of knowing who God is, of experiencing who God is, and then seeing reality a little bit more clearly because of that vantage? 2 weeks ago, David taught us to pray through fear. Today, David's going to help us to see reality in through God's lens. And the obstacle to that for many of us is that whole be still, slow down, and don't hurry thing. So we're going to look at this in 3 themes: be still, know God, know yourself. And it's snowing, and it might be just as bad in 10 minutes as it is in an hour. So let's take our time. We'll pop some popcorn and watch a movie if we're stuck. Be still. Sounds simple enough, right? But it's actually very, very difficult. And here's why. Because the way you and I live that we call normal is historically abnormal, which has made stillness nearly impossible. And I will choose not to bore you with 700 years of history, but I will say, when the Germans invented the clock, something happened. We shifted from artificial time, we created artificial time. We started to walk away from the natural rhythms of rising with the sun, going to bed with the sun. When technology advanced even more, and in the 1960s, we started to have home appliances and all kinds of other things, people said, this is going to lead to all kinds of leisure time. Look at the time we get back. We don't have to cook over a fire. We don't have to fill in the blank, things that are normal for us. The Senate did a study where they predicted we are going to work 20 hours a week, 27 weeks a year, because we will be so productive and do more leisure time. What has happened? The exact opposite. We've spent every ounce of what they thought would lead to leisure time, where you slow down, you Sabbath, you commune with God, and you connect with loved ones, and we've exchanged it for everything but that. And then in 2007, we inadvertently not only created an iPhone, we created a tracking device, which tells us that most of us are prone to look at our phone more than 4.5 hours a day. Over 70 sessions at 2,600 touches to that phone per day. Something has happened historically and in the present moment that has made this first part of this command, be still, which is before know God, nearly impossible. So in a society that prizes efficiency and productivity above all, hurry is not an occasional necessity for us. It is our new normal. And all that to say, be still is not as simple as it sounds. Dallas Willard has lots of writing on this, and at one point he is asked, hey, what's the one thing a modern person could do to deepen their spiritual life and become more like Jesus? And after a long pause, he always paused. He said, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Hurry is the great enemy of spirituality in our day. Michael Zigarelli, a professor at Charleston University School of Business, did a 5-year study of 20,000 self-professing Christians where he identified busyness as the number one distraction from life with God. Fancy way of saying we're too busy to pray. And he said this about his findings. He said this, it may be the case that 1, Christians are assimilating to a culture of busyness, hurry, and overload, which leads to 2, God becoming more marginalized in Christians' lives, which leads to 3, a deteriorating relationship with God, which leads to 4, Christians becoming even more vulnerable to adopting secular assumptions about how to live, which leads to 5, more conformity to a culture of busyness, hurry, and overload where the cycle begins again. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, said, hurry isn't of the devil, it is the devil. Richard Foster, author of Celebration of Discipline, said that in a contemporary society, our adversary majors on three things: noise, hurry, and crowds. If he can keep us engaged in muchness and manyness, he will rest satisfied. And a journalist once asked the Catholic theologian Thomas Merton to diagnose the leading spiritual disease of our time. Merton responded with a one-word answer. He said, efficiency. So you know that story about the floods are coming and a guy is standing on his roof and he's praying to God and he says, hey, God, save me. I'm going to drown. And a boat passes by and a helicopter comes and he says, no. You know that story? So I just gave you guys an academic, a psychiatrist, a Quaker, a theologian, and others that were basically saying to you and I, hurry is the great spiritual enemy of our lives. And a hurried life leads to a prayerless life. So when David says, I want to take you where you're not naturally thinking or where you're not naturally going and know God, but really know him, trust him, connect with him, the first thing he says to us is, be still. And I just want to name the problem that is in direct opposition to the normal way we live our lives. And because of that, when it comes to prayer, there's a shift that David and writers of Scripture and practitioners through the years would invite us into that would say, because of many, many external factors, the default settings in our own mind, heart, and soul not merely reflect the busyness around us. In fact, they are the cause of the busyness around us. At some point, we made a historic shift, and it wasn't because the environment changed. It was because we were left to ourselves. And in the void, we created muchness, manyness, and busyness. And that stands in a difficult place when it comes to our lives. And I know there are real demands on our time. I know you have real responsibilities. I know there are many balls that you are juggling. But I also want to lovingly remind you of the author of this, who is a practitioner of this. David's not writing this from some spiritual retreat, Sabbathing, and just enjoying God's glory, being fed milk and honey and grapes for the rest of his life as royalty. He's not doing that. He's leading a nation in a time of tribal warfare where literally just above the hillside most of the time is a whole group of people that will attack him. He knows the moment is coming that they're coming to overthrow his kingdom. So he's not living this alternative sort of life under no threat, saying, oh, you guys just got to be still. He's figuring out a way to integrate this into his life, and still he prioritized and he practiced stillness and slowing down, a habit that allowed him to see reality clearly. Be still. Easier said than done. And then our second theme, know God. Be still and know God. You all remember last April when we all took a break from our normal days to stare at the sun? You all remember how rightfully so. I remember you coming home and the timing of the eclipse passing over was right at the time schools were passing out and kids were loading on buses, and school officials are freaking out. Wade, you literally had to make these decisions. What do we do? Because if one of these morons goes out and stares at the sun on our watch, we're getting sued till kingdom come. It was just one of those bizarre days. And I remember stepping out here under the portico, and Brandon was there and Grace was there. and I was unprepared for that. But they had glasses, so we're swapping glasses and staring at the sun. And I just remember kind of having this ironic, comical moment, just looking over at TVCS. Here's hundreds of kids doing the thing we tell them not to do. There's people stopped their cars over at Sheetz under the gas pumps doing it. And it was just kind of this ironic, comical scene. And then I noticed something else happening at Sheetz, is that there was a truck trying to get into the spot where he wanted to pump up the air in his tires, but he couldn't because there were a bunch of people literally standing there staring at the sun, and they weren't budging. And so he honked. They gave him no time. He honked again, no response. Then he rolls his window down and yells some words I won't repeat from this stage. And they start to notice. And then a few of the more stubborn ones did what I might have done in that moment. And they go Tiananmen Square on him. They're like, nah, I'm not moving, dog. There's literally an eclipse right there. You can pump your tires some other time. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed. But when I was reflecting on that, this just came back as a story a couple days ago. When I reflect back on that, I'm like, that is inherently ironic for many reasons. Because here is millions of people, regardless of belief, socioeconomic status, workday, school, all doing the same thing. They're being caught up in something transcendent and something new and something magical and cosmic. And here is this dude saying, yo, get out of my way. I don't care if the moon's blocking the sun and we get to see it the most clearly in my lifetime. I need to put air in my tires. Now, maybe he had valid reasons for that, but I'm going to use him in the negative for the purpose of my illustration. And it just says this to me. He had a bit of a perspective issue. The whole world, our whole area is looking up at something, and he's like, the air in my tires matter more. Get out of my way. Be still and know God. So yes, truck driver pumping your tires, you're very important. But here's my point. We problematically tend to see the world from behind our own two eyes. And from that perspective, we convince ourselves that we are or we should be in control. We should be directing our lives and ordering our future. We convince ourselves we don't have time to slow down. We make ourselves many gods in this cosmic story, and if we were to slow down, our lives would unravel. But prayer is what, according to Philip Yancey? It's the act of seeing reality from God's point of view, which inherently would have to map through our own struggle, that if we're going to be still and know God, we have to be still and know that we are not God. Psalm 8, another one of David's prayers, marvels, just cosmic scale on this idea of perspective. He says, when I consider your heavens, the works of your fingers, the moon and stars which you have set in place. Now pause. He's got his eyes upward. He sees the magic in the sky. He sees the cosmic reality of creator and creation. And he sees how really insignificant he is in light of that. And then he says, what is mankind that you are mindful of them? Human beings that you take care of them. You see, from that kind of perspective, there's a good kind of small. God is big enough to paint the stars across the sky, but he's also loving enough to concern himself with me and you and the events of our days and the emotional fluctuations that we feel as we go through it. The great scandal and the most important work of prayer is simply to let ourselves be loved by God. Let me say that again, because if you can hear that and get it deep, it will change your life. The great scandal and the most important work of prayer is simply to let yourself be loved by God. I'm going to go a little off the cuff. God, give me grace to make it back. Sometimes I think that we must prove our spirituality to God by how much we can talk to him or about him. We make the primary measure of our spirituality, our relationship to God, about doing things for God without saying, what God is most interested in primarily is, let me lavish my love on you. Would you let this gospel story of the rescue and the belonging and the chosenness that I have predestined from the foundations of the earth to include you in my family, let that get so deeply in you that you can see reality clearly. And that's not to minimize our struggles and our pain and our stories, but it is to say there's a profound difference when you're be still and know God and going through life. And when it comes to prayer, are you beginning with the place of God's radical, revolutionary, unconditional, always pursuing love for you? Or does prayer in a fast-paced, busied, hurry life becomes like an additional add-on where you're trying to prove to him how spiritual you are? You see the difference? And I think that is profound. It all starts with seeing God for who he is, seeing ourselves for who we are. You painted the stars in the sky, yet you're concerned about me. There is a good kind of smallness to our life, and that starts with seeing. I love cities, visiting cities. I love visiting a place like New York City. I don't think I could ever jump the gate to live in a place like that. I love visiting Portland when we've gone out for conferences. I don't think I would want to live there, but I do love, for small doses at a time, the gritty, fast-paced urban centers with culture and arts and restaurants and lots of them. I've never seen an Applebee's in New York City. Several years ago, I was sitting on the deck of a hostel by the airport in Joburg, South Africa, after spending a couple of weeks leading a short-term mission trip in a rural area with a bunch of teenagers. In the sky during those 3 weeks, in a rural spot in South Africa. I don't know what you picture in your mind when you think of South Africa. Maybe you picture safari and almost a deserty brown climate, but the area we were is like tropics. Beautiful. It's green. There's palm trees in your front yard. There's a lemon tree in your front yard. There's mango trees. There's animals. There are monkeys that will sneak in your house and steal food off your counter, so you got to keep your doors and windows shut. Beautiful, lush area. And at nighttime, when it got dark. And then you just look up, and it's the most beautiful, bright stars you could ever imagine. It's quiet. There's a breeze. There's not the sound of traffic. There's no haze from pollution or whatever. It's just beautiful. And it became somewhat of a habit in the times and the trips I've had there that just before turning in at night, you just walk outside and you look up and you marvel and you look at the sky and you try to rehearse a prayer like this, who am I that you are mindful of me, God? Help me to know that. Help me to see that. Help me to place my life and my story up into that cosmic story. You painted this sky, and yet you're concerned about the hairs on my head. It's amazing. I remember being at that hostel, and it's late, it's loud. There are some other internationals that, maybe not the best influence on our 17 and 18-year-old kids, but they were hanging out, and it's about time to turn in for the night, so I walk outside. It's just kind of my habit at that point, and I look up, and guess what? Nothing. We're in a city. The lights, the fog, the pollution has drowned out what I had grown to see and admire, and it's gone. It's there, but I can't see it. The city lights of the city had drowned out the heavenly lights above. And isn't there profound symbolism in that? The artificial lights of our own making, my making, are drowning out the heavenly lights of God's making. See, we created an illusion. We live where the default reality, the default settings of our life, whether it be the sin inside of us, whether it be the patterns of our own family origins and struggles, whether it just be the cultural moment that we're living in, is that we don't see reality clearly. We actually see reality in a form of an illusion. We struggle to see the reality of God beyond the lights and the habits, the sin, and the busyness, and the goals of our own making. We've created a way to live where we can actually pretend that all we can see is all there is. And so sometimes when you sing a song like Hope on the Horizon, it's very much a be still and know God, because you're trying to remind your soul to reach into the horizon of the hope and the more transcendent reality of the kingdom that God has secured for our behalf already and is unchanging. Sometimes we have to see past what we're going through or see through it so that we can reach out and pull the future reality into our midst. And that is impossible, my friends. Here's my point. That's impossible unless you slow down long enough and become undistracted long enough to fix the eyes of your heart and of your mind that direction. In other words, David knew exactly what he was doing when he said something. So I would say this verse differently. Just say it in the negative. You're going to find it nearly impossible to know God and know yourself unless you learn to slow down and be still. This isn't just life would be a little bit better. This is like a next phase, a next level habit of the spiritually minded. David's saying, no. You will sit under the stars of creation. But unless you slow down to look up long enough and to remove the artificial lights from your life that hold it back, you will never know and see God. You will never know and see yourself. You will never see reality on God's terms. David's urging us. He's saying, friends, look up, slow down, look up, see your lives against the backdrop of something bigger. See your story within the greater story. So here's the foundation for prayer. Be still, and then remember who God is. And there's one more essential piece, and that is know yourself. I want to take you to Psalm 146. It seems like one of the most out-of-place lines in a psalm that you'll ever read. Because smack in the middle of a bunch of poetry about praising the greatness of God, the psalmist drops what sounds like a line from a eulogy, okay? So go read the rest of Psalm 46, but here's the line that the psalmist just drops in the middle of great are you, God, you are majestic, you should be praised. And then he says this, put not your trust in princes and the Son of Man, in whom there is no salvation. And then here it is. When his breath departs, he returns to the earth. On that very day, his plans perish. That seems weird. Why are you dropping a eulogy line in the middle of this poem? Well, when you see it from the right perspective, it changes everything. Let me explain it this way. This might sound weird to you, but one of the most sacred places physically in my life is just a couple hundred yards that way, and it's a cemetery. It's just behind here. It's just up on a knoll of a hill. And breakthrough prayers have occurred there. Whatever, I don't know, when you just feel like God loves you has happened there. When you get a sense of okay, God is with us, moments have happened there. And from the vantage, it helps every now and then, and it's just a couple hundred yards, you see this building in a totally different light. And you see the people in this building in a different light. And it's not like an earth level, up at the eclipse level view of God, but it just changes the vantage for a moment. And to see both the beautifully insignificant reality of the smallness of this place against the backdrop of a creator God who actually still cares about every hair on every head that walks in this building and is part of this community, to see that you have to look across the top of tombstones. What a reality check. David says, when his breath departs, he returns to earth, and on that very day, his plans perish. Just a few weeks ago, it was week 7 or week 8 of Foundations, and on my mind was everything that I had to do this week. My brain is in tomorrow morning's meetings, check-ins. It's on the recurring note on my phone and laptop that syncs, that gives me the to-do list and the checks. I'm thinking what I want to check off in the right order, and I'm standing there in that cemetery just reflecting, trying to be present to the moment of the night, and all I could think about was tomorrow. And God brought me back to Matt, look at the tombstones in front of you. On the day of your death, all these plans, they're gone. They perish. And it's not that you don't matter, it's that you need to see yourself in a larger context. What if this morning, I don't know how to say this, but what if the reality of your mortality, what if the fact that all of us will die one day will be a comfort to you? How could it be a comfort? It's because in the space between your breath right now and your final breath is a God that is concerned for you, and God cares about every fleeting thought. He cares about the purpose that he has for you and the things he's called you to do, but he's also the God that says, be still. This is by my power anyways. This is by my grace. I'm working through you as a vessel. Your responsibility is not to bear the burden of the whole world. Your responsibility is to cultivate and empty yourself to be used and surrendered and known by you. Would you just slow down? May I remind you of the gift and the beauty of your own mortality that has even an eternal reward that comes with, you'll be with me forever. We'll be okay. And don't forget the end of this story. One day I'm going to end all the things that are contrary to my life and my love. And I got this. Would you just be still and know that I am God? And I think Siri agrees. It's all good. Live this life. Live this world. Let me try this again. Live like this world, and this life is all you've got. And you will lose yourself trying to be everything for everybody. But live your life and lose your life to the greater story, to Jesus, to his kingdom, and you will live with an internal peace, an awareness of God. It'll be so freeing. Because if busyness proves your importance, you have to stay busy. If wealth is a sign of freedom, you have to make more money. If knowing people makes you feel like you matter, then you have to make more contacts. It's a scarcity mindset to an abundance God. It's living in a constant state of fear that causes you to accumulate life rather than living it. Do you hear what I'm saying? Just be still and know that God is God. He is God. You are not. I am not. This church is not. Your wife, your husband, your kids are not. Your job, your activities, your gifts, your calling, your purpose, your pain, it's not God. God is. Therefore, step back. Take a breath. Lean into God's acceptance of you. And wrestle with the discernment piece that comes now that says, to what point am I supposed to step forward into what God is calling me into? And what point am I supposed to sit back and lean into what God is unfolding in front of me? Be still and know that I am God. Before I move on, David was pleading with God to remind him that he's temporary. It's weird, right? You ever wake up and be like, God, remind me that I'm going to die someday. And everyone I love. It's just awful. It's awful. There's nothing like grief. But David isn't asking God to remind him of that because he's depressed. He's not asking that because he's just resigned and passive and uncaring and stoic, and he's gone all Buddhist and he's just going to sit back and accept whatever may come, and suffering's the whole point. No. It's because that is what shows him his true value. God, you paint the stars in the sky, yet you are mindful of me. Remind me. Remind me. Help me remember. He's not wallowing in his smallness or his lack. He's celebrating it, and he's free enough to admit that he's not in control, that he's not all-powerful, and that he's not enough on his own. And here's the great part, and that he doesn't have to be. Many of us can easily slip into, well, yeah, I know I'm not that. And we just wallow, and we dig our own pits of self-pity, and we pull up a recliner chair, and we just stay in that spot right there. And there's clinical aspects and real aspects of that, that's right, but the spiritual journey of God, the reality of God, be still and know God, is that you don't stay there and park it because you're worthless. You sit back in acceptance that he is God and you are not. You see what I'm saying? When you see how great God is and how small you are, the lie of the enemy would be like, therefore you don't matter. But it's the exact opposite. When you see how great God is and how small you are, you see how profoundly you matter to that God. That the creator of the world has time for you. The creator is interested in you. The creator delights in you. That the creator of the world has hidden redemption in you. I want to preach on this, but I'm not going to. Check out what happens at the end of this chapter. Be still and know that I am God. And then what happens? The next question is, well, what's the outcome? What's the result? David paints your stillness and seeing God clearly, not to outcomes that are for you. He doesn't say, be still and know that I am God, and then you'll have peace. Then you'll be able to sleep at night. Then your anxiousness will calm down, although those things may come. He says, then I will be exalted among the nations. What? What if your calm dependence on God is like recipe for how God renews and heals the world? See that? He's not asking you to go hustle in his name. He's not asking you to go become savior and he can go into autopilot name. He's saying, guess what happens when a bunch of my followers really learn to live from my love, slow down enough counterculturally to just be still, to know who I am, to see the smallness of them and not slip into self-deprecation and depression, but slip into, this is the most freeing truth I could live with. What's the end result that David ties it to? The world sees God. The world sees who they are. Healing flows. The kingdom comes in and roots out all the other things. Only when you see who you are can you also see how profoundly you matter. Be still and know that I am God. So, I want you to, as we close, you guys can come up. You're like, 11:40? Yeah, y'all, there's snow out there. I want you to picture yourself on a beach. It's a brisk day in November. You can smell the seaweed and the ocean air, the waves coming in and out with the tide, and the brisk wind blows against your face, and it cuts through your jacket. And now I'm Owen and you're CJ. I want to ask you, do you see anything more powerful than you? If so, sit back and let it be. Would you stand? So I want to give you one reminder, and then I want to give you a practice. How do I be still? Okay, I want to make it practical. Here's the reminder. I want you to know that emotions aren't truth. Emotions aren't reality. They're valid, they're purposeful, they're a helpful dashboard. But when reality, when you are still, one of the most difficult aspects of that is learning to map and make sense of the feelings that rise to the surface. And emotions are valid, They're part of your created order, but they are not the authority on determining reality. God is. So as you may put this into practice where you find a rhythm to learn to be still, I want to warn you that your emotions may come flooding in. And that's positive, but it can also be taken in an unhealthy way. Let the painter of the stars in the universe determine reality for you. Let him become the filter by which you interpret every thought that you need to take captive and every emotion you need to filter. Don't bury them. Don't give them too much weight. Good? Here's the second thing. Let's turn this into a practice. And I must confess, I feel hypocritical because this has been a rhythm by which God has made profound breakthrough in my life, and I'm in a season where this has not been my strongest practice, but it is one of the most life-giving practices that I've ever experienced. For me, what does stillness look like? Busy dad of 3, job demands, you all got him for your own story. If you can find even 1 minute, for me, because I'm a bit mystical, I love to light a candle. It's a ritual that says, I'm lighting this candle, figure out how to be distraction-free. Or we'll talk about that a little bit more next week from Psalm 73, but light a candle, sit in a chair, take a few breaths, I put my feet on the ground, and I say something like, here I am, Lord. Here I am, Lord. Maybe come, Holy Spirit. Maybe it's, Lord, have mercy. Maybe it's, I can't, you can. I can't, you can. Whatever it may be, find quick, accessible anchor sort of prayer. And then just sit and refuse the urge to talk to God and just silently be with him. It sounds like, well, how hard could that be? It's impossibly hard to do it without other thoughts and emotions coming in. It's impossibly hard, but it's like a muscle that you can train. I promise you can. And when I first started practicing stillness and listening as a form of prayer, that did not fix my boxes for what prayer is at all. Prayer was like, hoorah, screaming at God to change the world. The idea that I just sit there and wait silently with no tangible outcome. Many times walking away, I'd be like, was that even have a point? That didn't check the box. When I was early in that journey, every distraction felt like, gosh, you suck. Every time my mind went here, it's like, man, can you keep it together for 10 seconds, you loser? And you just heap shame on yourself because you can't even pay attention to God. Like, you got Bible knowledge, you're quoting Psalms to yourself, and you can't even think about him for 10 straight seconds. And so that will happen. But here's the other thing that grows in you. I want you to rethink this from the beginning. What if every distraction in prayer is just an invitation back to a God that welcomes you? What if every distraction in stillness, every time your mind goes, don't bury yourself in shame and worthlessness or I'm a loser, maybe it's just me. Say, no, God's inviting me back, redirecting the eyes of my heart towards him. And if you need a mental image for that, go to the prodigal son. This is you running down the driveway to your father, throwing his hands wide open to you. One final word. I want to read this because I wrote it out. We are outcome style people, so we want the reward on our time of investment. The kingdom's a little bit different. The reward on a practice of stillness may not be seen for you in weeks and months and in years to come. It's deeper than an outcome, and very, very likely because your stillness doesn't make a demand on God he has to do to change his will to your desires. What it really does is it gets you to the place from, you are God, I am not, I will trust you. and I can bring my awareness to you. Every one of us has a different version of the same story, which looks like unexpected disruption, struggle with our own sin, struggle with our own shame. Prayer is not about manipulating God into your desired outcome. It's getting to the place of like, give me Jesus, and that's all. You are God, I am not. So the purpose of this stillness that you might practice is not revelation, though it's nice when it happens. Hear me. The purpose is consent. You are consenting to the work of God's Spirit, which is deeper than understanding what He's doing or even having the words to articulate. You practice silence as a sacrificial offering to God. And so, Jesus, we need you. We come to you. We're clinging to you. We offer the gift of our attention, of our focus, of our affection, of our emotion. We present it to you as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to you because of the work of your Son, Jesus. May the deep love of the Father given to us through the sacrifice of Jesus that paid the debt we could not pay and brought life where there was death. May the Spirit empower that reality deeper into who we are, so that the gap between what we believe about you and what we experience will be trusted more fully and closed in the stillness where no outcome may even change, no emotion may be bubbling up, but all of a sudden we're living our life consenting to your work, surrendered to your plan. Holy Spirit, come.